Okay, now turning to my favourite visa type. Not so much that it's the visa type that we charge the most for, but because it's the one that really gets to the heart of this town as far as I'm concerned, which is, entrepreneurism. Foreign nationals come to Hong Kong in droves. They get off the airport, they get off the aircraft, and they can smell the air, and they smell money, and they say, right, I want a piece of this. And so normally, as we see, they use the visitor visa for a certain amount of time to get the lay of the land, and then they say, right, I'm going to establish a business. So what do I do about immigration status? This represents about 80% of our workload, and it's the one that I'm talking about almost constantly, day in, day out. Okay, so to apply for a business investment visa, you need to be a foreign national, not a mainlander, but a foreign national, and you need to show that you can make a substantial contribution to the economy of Hong Kong, which of course is, in many ways, it's like asking how long is a piece of string. But there are certain themes that run writ large throughout an approved investment visa application. And these themes are the creation of local employment opportunities. These are the availability of business premises that are suitable for the constructs of your plan, and that you have resources, both financial resources and non-funding resources, which I'll come to. But the way the Immigration Department look at it is, if you can pass this approvability test, then clearly you're going to be welcome in Hong Kong because of the three pillars of approval that I've just outlined to you. The thing to note right from the get-go, though, before I get into the heart of the approvability test, is the conundrum that exists for anyone who's making an application for a business investment visa. And effectively, it's a catch-22 that exists. And it goes like this. You have to show that you can make, prospectively, a contribution to the economy of Hong Kong. Now, the law says that you can't join in a business until you secure the consent of the Immigration Department. But you can't secure the consent of the Immigration Department until you show contribution to Hong Kong. And, in fact, as you'll see, you can't show contribution to Hong Kong without actually joining in a business. Because what the Immigration Department are looking for when considering the approvability test is you having created, in a sense, new facts on the ground here in Hong Kong, so that they can be persuaded of your potential to make that substantial contribution. But you can't create those new facts on the ground as a visitor because you'd be breaching your conditions of stay. So how do you get around it? And it's like everything with Hong Kong immigration, pure pragmatism. They close their eyes. They effectively, if you have an active application in the system, they forbear to prosecute for any, as they would have it, perceived breach of conditions of stay as a visitor. And I guess there's probably legal ramifications, because you might conclude that the way that policy is being implemented, you're actively encouraging people to breach their conditions of stay because you're asking them to adduce evidence that they've created these new facts on the ground. And you could then scratch your head and say, well, I suppose they're endorsing it's okay for me to do this. So the way it works is, if you have an active application in the system, the Immigration Department don't care. If you don't have an active application in the system, then the Immigration Department do care. So if the Immigration Department find out that you're undertaking a business as a visitor, they have something to say about that. Particularly if you presented yourself at the boundary or at the airport as a visitor and you don't know how the world works, and you say to the immigration officer when he asks you what you're doing here, and he says, well, I'm running a business, then the immigration officer will have something to say about that. So effectively, the way that you solve the problem is by getting an active application in the system straight away. And I always tell the client, if your intention to reside is crystallized, then at that point submit an application for a business investment visa. Unfortunately, many foreign nationals decide that they would prefer to wait as long as they possibly can for any number of reasons before they submit their application, which can be a good thing, but it can be a bad thing. It can be a good thing because you actually create the circumstances that the Immigration Department would like to see to anticipate an approval. But it can be a bad thing because if you set off on your entrepreneurial journey and you have, with all good intentions, that the expectation that you're going to be in a position 3 or 4 months down the road to actually deliver on an approvable scenario for the Immigration Department, and business being what business is, you don't actually achieve those outcomes, and before you know it, you've been running a business hanging on by the skin of your teeth for the last 18 months with everything invested, and you haven't got anything going on whatsoever that the Immigration Department will actually conclude represents your potential to make a substantial contribution to the economy of Hong Kong. And now what you've got is this bear of a business, and you've got this profile as a visitor shuttling backwards and forwards, and you've got, you know, the omnipresent danger of the Immigration Department saying the next time they present you, whoa, what's going on here, and then giving you a short conditional landing. So you know, some foreign nationals get themselves into quite a pickle by not realizing what's required to get an investment visa approved, and they go off and start the business anyway. So it's a double-edged sword. But this is how, when clients usually say to you, well, how can I create all this stuff on the ground if I'm here as a visitor? I can't create these jobs. I'm not allowed to do that. I can't engage in these contracts or do all the things that I'm kind of expected to do because I'm not allowed to do it. So I'm not going to be able to submit that to the Immigration Department. And I always say, well, no, that's just a cop-out. Actually, the Immigration Department will close their eyes to what you're doing as long as you're able to pass the approvability test. And I still think it comes as a surprise to everybody that goes on to get approved that they've been able to engage in all this activity as a visitor, and the Immigration Department haven't taken them to task for it. But that's how it works. So, because of Hong Kong's entrepreneurial orientation, I always say to clients, look, if you're committed to the business to the same extent as you're committed to your employment visa, to your investment visa application, you're going to get approved. Because you do what you have to do in business to be successful, right? It's the same for immigration as well. And particularly these days, when you've got a psychology of startups and lean ways of operating and minimal viable products and basically getting into a business with the bare minimum of financial commitment and bare minimum of more substantive commitment, hoping that you're going to be successful when you get sort of, you know, towards the end of the early part of your endeavour. All that's well and good from a commercial perspective, but if you expect the Immigration Department to buy into that, representing substantiality, at the moment, the way that they administer policy, it's not going to work. So, passing the approvability test, as I've mentioned, has got 3 pillars of approval. The first is you have to have suitable business premises. It's got to be suitable in all the circumstances. Co-working spaces, shared offices are okay. You can start off with a virtual office as long as you've got a clear pathway to proper business premises. Normally when you've hired your first employee, and your plan would show that. You can't expect the Immigration Department to approve your investment visa application if you're planning to run this business from your spare bedroom or your kitchen table. Not going to happen. Local recruitment, creation of local jobs. As I say here, the quality of the jobs is just as important to the number as the number of the jobs, and future jobs will work. You don't have to have created jobs now or at the point of approval. You can say to the Immigration Department, when you put forward a really good, sensible plan, that you are going to create jobs, and it's going, the timeline through the creation of those jobs is X amount, and at the time that you create those jobs, then you'll upgrade your office premises, because as I say, the employees can't report to work to his kitchen table every day. And as long as you set it out that there's a clear pathway to local employment opportunities and it's rational in all the circumstances, in my experience, the Immigration Department will buy into that. They will, in the main, if they're not satisfied as to the sustainability of what you're intending to do at the point of approval, they may say, well, all right, we'll give you the first 12 months, that's no problem. but we're going to subject your next extension to a review of your business. So we want to look back at what's gone on over the last 12 months to ensure that you have in fact been taking steps to make the substantial contribution to the economy of Hong Kong, and then we'll assess really where you are at that time. The other thing to say about the business review exercise is that once you get the initial approval and the review at the end of 12 months, in my experience, as long as you've earnestly tried to move the business forward in all of those 12 months, and you haven't just then sort of taken your approval and then sat around or spent the last year painting pictures of the harbour and not doing anything with your business, then because the Immigration Department don't want to pull the rug from under the feet of entrepreneurs, they will extend you after a vigorous review, but they'll subject you to review the next year as well. Now, the cynical amongst us could say, well, that sounds like an half-decent plan, right? If I can get my first approval and sort of utter my way through to the first year and then, you know, make a decent argument and explain, you know, how it hasn't really panned out because after all, no business plan survives first contact with the enemy. Perhaps when I get my business reviewed, I'll be able to get another 12 months and then just keep on going like that. And it's not a strategy I'd espouse, but you'd be absolutely amazed the number of people that come to me after 7 years and effectively they're coming to me for the right of abode application, and I've looked at what they've been doing and they literally have been going from year to year to year to year, extending on a 1 year basis, not subject to the 1, 2, 3 year pattern, but just year after year after year, going through a 6 or an 8 week review exercise, producing accounts and, you know, producing documentation that speaks to how they've been looking for the right candidate for the job but they can't find anybody. And anyway, it would appear that the Immigration Department don't actually take the status away from you as long as you're earnestly moving the business forward. But I certainly wouldn't advise anybody to be adopting that strategy if you can eke through the first year, because life's too short for dealing with the Immigration Department every year for 6 or 8 weeks at a time. Okay, so suitable business premises, local recruitment, and then resources. And I say this is where the rubber hits the road in terms of what the Immigration Department are looking to see beyond the creation of local jobs and the employment opportunities. So these are financial resources. How are you going to fund the business and where's the money coming from? Technically, the Immigration Department say that any funds that you use to finance your business, you need to have owned beneficially for at least 2 years immediately prior to submitting the application. In practice, what they do is they call for 3 months bank statements. And what we do is, because it's a 4 to 6 month process if you're applying for this visa on an entry visa basis, we submit a snapshot of where they are financially at the point of application submission, and then we submit 3 months bank statements, usually about month 4, month 5, so that the Immigration Department can see that the money's been available throughout all of that time and they're clear they've got the money that they need to finance the business accordingly. The second type of resources are commercial resources. So, as I say, effectively, you know, who you're doing business with and what support do you have. Now, commercial resources are really all those kinds of things that you have at play in your business that are driving you to make this investment decision in the first place. So it's all well and good having money, and it's all well and good having a really good idea, but most rational entrepreneurs actually have a little bit more of substance going on that are driving them to actually move this opportunity forward, that's leading them to make the investment visa application. So in this regard, it can be, you know, what contracts have you got? Any work in progress? Have you got confirmed clients? Are you bringing IP to Hong Kong that's been successful somewhere else? And if you deploy it in Hong Kong, it's going to be successful for you here. Have you got, if it's a technology company, have you got a minimum viable product? Have you spent, you know, some time previously developing code to the point where it's now about to be finished? All of these things, as I say, the kind of things that you would expect to have present, that they're giving you the confidence to make this decision to invest in this business in the first place. Are they all present? And as part of the application, you show to the Immigration Department as much of this stuff as you possibly can, so that they can conclude that actually there's a really good chance that when you take your money and the opportunities that are included in in the documentation that they can see as reflecting commercial resources, that your business stands a really good chance of going on to become a solidly entrenched commercial enterprise. Okay, so there's those two resources. The third resource is track record. You know, what's your CV look like? Have you done this before previously? Interestingly, when you apply for an employment visa, your CV is absolutely pivotal. Special skills, knowledge and experience of value to are not really available in Hong Kong. But in the context of business investment visa, your CV is a mere resource. And you don't need to be a graduate. And you don't need 10 years of prior experience if, in fact, you're going to make an investment visa application. And then, because it is the Immigration Department after all, part of the Security Bureau, Security Branch, is the business in compliance? So, is it licensed, properly registered, business registration, what's going on, anything that suggests that there should be the approval of another agency for the purposes of being able to carry out this business lawfully? Is all that in place? If it's in place, you're home free. Is there any security objection to the nature of what you're proposing to do? Now let me give you an example of a security objection that played itself out in a very interesting way for me. It would have been just after the handover. There was a company that were primarily out of the Philippines, but they were owned by, if I remember properly, an American guy, an Indian guy, and somebody from Singapore. And what they'd done is they put together a multi-level marketing business. And it was primarily, the audience for this multi-level marketing business was primarily the Filipino domestic helper community here, because they'd taken the same offering to the Philippines and cleaned up. And effectively what the product was the foundation product was an investment in a gold coin, a Krugerrand, if I remember properly. And en route to actually owning these Krugerrands was this chain of introductions that allowed everybody that was in the chain of introductions to make a margin in a typical multi-level marketing type scenario. But it wasn't a Ponzi scheme, because in the final analysis the value that was there was reflected in the Krugerrand. And I listened to their business model and I said to myself, okay, how are the Immigration Department going to make of this? And then I asked them, I said, like, what's its lawful status in the Philippines? They said, oh, it's perfectly lawful, da-da-da-da-da-da. I said, okay, fine. So what have we got that shows that this is lawful in Hong Kong? I've got QC opinion. Okay, let me have a look at it. Okay, that's fine. So we submitted the application to the Immigration Department, and lo and behold, they obviously had some problem with it. And what the Immigration Department do, if they have a problem with something, but don't have the means to resolve it, is they do nothing. So the applications went in, and they were growing this business, and after about 12 months, the Immigration Department still hadn't made a decision. And then, of course, the clients started to get antsy about this, because they're here doing what they're doing in business, and then the catch-22 is sort of running through their psychology, knowing that the Immigration Department could at any time, if they wanted, come in and have something to say about it, but they never did. And if eventually they decided that if they couldn't actually get immigration status to be here with their families and all the rest of it, they would just go somewhere else and they'd exploit some other market, which is what I understood that they actually did. But there's a really good example where there was clearly a security objection, but the Immigration Department couldn't put the finger on it quite properly, and they're certainly not going to take a view as to whether or not it's a Ponzi scheme, because they're going to end up in all kinds of hot water if they take that view. So simply what they did was just to do nothing. So no problem didn't exist. And normally, as we see with immigration, the longer it takes for an approval and the longer you're here as a visitor, the more nervous and antsy you get about it all. And so eventually the problem goes away. So it's very, very pragmatic.